Sherricka Jones, Shreveport CAO. Hey, Miss Sherricka, welcome back to Keel. How you doing today?
I'm well. Good morning to you all.
Thank you for taking time for us. Okay, let's start with the proposed, $220 million bond proposal. That amount, 220. Did that amount come from the mayor's office originally? Did it originate with the Citizens Committee? Tell us about that a little bit.
Sure. The amount came from the amount that we know from the city standpoint that we can afford. It is much lower than what we are legally maxed out to issue, and we know that with the debt that we're paying off, we can replace that debt with the additional $220 million in potential projects. But it didn't stop there with us. Of course, the Citizens Bond Committee had to vet that number as well, because they had to decide how much they wanted us to ultimately propose to go to the voters.
When you came up with that amount, or when the committee did you start with a list of what you wanted to do? Did you start with a set of goals and say, this is what we want to accomplish, what will this cost? Or did you start with the amount and say, what can we afford?
We started with a list of what our needs are. And unfortunately, as you can imagine, that number was much larger than the $220 million that we could afford. So that total list had to be narrowed down by the citizens to ultimately come to something that we could move forward over very high priorities and on the top of the list.
Can you dumb down this for me in terms of there's really dumb it down if you don't mind. There's a 15 mil property tax, I believe it is, that's going to go off the books at the end of this year, correct?
A portion of that 15 mil is rolling off.
Okay. And you would replace that portion with keeping the full 15 mils on the books? Would that be the proposal?
The proposal would ultimately continue that portion, which would keep the mills at 15.
Okay. How much would be rolling off this year?
About 6.2 mils.
Okay. So this would be a continuation of 6.2 mils that would be going away.
Correct.
And that 6.2 mils would fund this full 220 million?
That's correct.
Okay. In looking at the list, let me go back to 2011 when that bond issue from then was studied for, I think, 18 months to 2 years. They studied those projects. They heard from department heads. They heard from citizens. Many, many, many citywide meetings were held. You guys have been working on this for 30 days or 60 days. How did you speed it up so fast?
Sure.
Are you concerned about that?
I'm not concerned. Well, as you know, this administration only started 6 months ago. So, within that time frame, we have been moving quickly to, of course, meet with the mayor and understand his needs and priorities going forward, to meet with the departments. It took us some time, then to make sure that the council members understood what it is that we were doing, what would be required from them and from the citizens to get the names of the members that they wanted to serve on the committee. So the committee members, after they were formed, they spent a total of over 20 hours vetting projects and looking at all of the information that we, could provide for them. So I think that they have spent a lot of time with this, and I feel that they are confident with what they've provided to us and to the council.
The list of projects that you sent out is divided into 3 groups: special projects, roadway, drainage, water, fire, police, and SPAR. And I'm looking at, there's a couple of them that trouble me, and you help me with this if you don't mind. Under special projects, there's almost $12 million for economic growth and a job creation fund. Yesterday, I called that a slush fund. I know that was strong. Robert about fell out of his chair.
Threw my hip out, as a matter of fact.
Some folks are going to say we need more specific details about that. The $12 million is going to be spent how? Are you concerned that some of these are too broad and we need to narrow it down a little bit more?
Sure, and it depends on what do you mean by a slush fund, because, of course, the money has to be spent on capital improvements. And as we know, part of economic development and growing at the city of Shreveport is giving businesses the resources and the tools that they need to be able to develop. So the economic fund would give us that opportunity to be able to clean up properties that otherwise could not be cleaned up and could not be developed upon, so that our future industries and businesses can have an opportunity to be able to invest in the city of Shreveport.
Now, as this goes to the city council, what will be the relationship, what will be the give and take between the mayor's office and the city council as you have 7 council people sort of, I don't want to say fighting for their piece of the pie, but specifically fighting for their piece of the pie? How does that work?
Sure. First of all, I mean, the list that we've provided, we're confident with. It does cover, a lot of the very high priorities. And again, these are very tough decisions that the Citizens Committee made, very tough decisions that the council is going to make. And we feel like they will come to the best decision. Ultimately, at the end of the day, if we are putting $220 million towards needs for the city of Shreveport, we all have won.
Do you think the council will really come back and approve the $220 million? Do you think they'll come back with, say, 95, 100, 150, 120? In other words, are you concerned that they're going to chop some of your stuff?
We don't know. Again, the council has to approve these projects. They have to approve going forward with the election. I feel confident, will vet what they feel is best for the city of Shreveport, which is the citizens as a whole. We do want to see the majority amount of the projects going forward. I think that would be the most imprudent thing to do, is to reinvest and to use that funding to be able to make the majority of the impact as we possibly can. But if the council comes back and those projects look a little bit different, and then again, at the end of the day, the citizens have to make the final decision. And
that decision you're asking in November. Why November and not the October election?
Well, again, as you said, we were working with a time frame that, starting 6 months ago. So we wanted to give us a little bit of a breathing room to be able to work those deadlines. November 16th was a reasonable date that we could come to the voters and still be able to make sure that we have, gone through all of the steps that are required from the state.
In your view, and I know the council has to work through this, but do you anticipate this being 3 separate ballot items for these 3 groupings, or even more than that, or one got to sell it all?
It could come in a number of different forms, and that's something that we will be discussing with the council. We could see, again, 3 separate propositions or more. The thought of having separate propositions is the fact that voters can choose. There may be specific priorities that some citizens have over others, and instead of having to choose from all of them, they can collectively or within groups decide which projects that they want to see funded.
November seems a long way off when you say November. It's almost Christmas, but it's only like 120 days away. Does the possibility exist that the work that the city council has to do in association with the mayor's office, getting everything ready to go, may not be done by then? Is it a possibility, and what would the process be if it's not to roll this over to spring or some future date?
We would like to see that process completed in time for November because, as you all know, each year we have to do an ordinance levy for taxes for the current year. So before the taxes actually go away, we would like to see them be continued for 2020. As far as the deadline is concerned, and we've communicated with council members that at the next meeting, the first meeting in August, is the meeting that we would need for council members to approve a list of potential projects and to approve the city to go and apply to the state to get the election approval. So that there's not a lot of wiggle room, and the timeline is set for us to be able to get to the state so that in September, if they do ultimately approve the election applications, then we can start to go out into the community and doing meetings and town halls so that we can hear from the voters and explain to them what this proposal actually is and get their feedback.
One more thing. I'm hearing from a lot of folks that are saying this really doesn't address our huge infrastructure problems. that the city council needs to really adjust the numbers and put more of the money toward that. Were there a lot of items that were left off the list that you really would like to see addressed?
Again, the needs are greater than what we have the funding availability to fund. So unfortunately, we do have to look at those items that are very high on the priority list, those things that the citizens want to see done most urgently. Yes, I wish we could take care of everything, but at this point, we can only look at those items that are very critical, that we can afford.